It all starts on a nightmarish parallel Earth known to many as Deadworld. Life there means very little, and people who call themselves judges enforce laws that can be shockingly vicious, even by the standards of a violent city like that of Mega City 1. It's almost like a place occupied by thousands of Joffrey Baratheons, only 2,700 times more terrible. The Dark Judges, most famously Judge Death, Judge Fear, Judge Fire, and Judge Mortis, are basically the kingpins of this nightmarish world. They've twisted the concept of justice into their own brand, which is something truly monstrous. At their core, they believe life itself is the biggest crime, so they decide that every living thing must die, that every living thing must be punished. They haunt not just their own decimated Deadworld, but also Mega City 1 and several other places across different dimensions, only to return again and again through dimension-hopping technology or occult means. And in this video, we'll explore the entire history of these Dark Judges, including but not limited to Death, Fear, Fire, and Mortis, from their origins on Deadworld to their repeated invasions of Mega City 1, their brushes with DC Comics villains, and their eventual carnage on planets like Dominion. We'll talk about their leader, Judge Death, and explain what drives him to kill. We'll cover Judge Fear's obsession with spreading terror, Judge Fire's constant flames, and Judge Mortis's rotten touch. But before that, please consider subscribing to us. That small click from you will help us tremendously in bringing you these marvelous videos. And now, let's begin. Origins on Deadworld and Sydney Death's transformation. This story has a wide range of events and side characters, including the heroic Judge Dredd and psychic Judge Cassandra Anderson, an ex-judge named Kraken, and even guests like Batman and the Joker. It features multiple resurrections, cosmic-level destruction, and uncomfortable alliances. Although the Dark Judges sometimes work independently, they share the same unholy mission. Some of them, including Sister Despair and Judge Reaper, have some personal angles, which are sometimes pretty dark and unfortunate. Others, like Judge Scourge, Judge Silence, and Sister Siren, play smaller but equally terrifying roles. All of them find new methods to murder entire cities. They always come back because they're undead creatures who transcend normal physical limits. People have tried shutting them away in limbo, locking them in special cells, or even shattering their bodies, but their evil spirits always find a path back to the mortal plane. Before they became the Dark Judges, they were human judges on a planet notorious for cruelty. Life on Deadworld was cheap, and plenty of citizens embraced sadistic impulses. Sydney Death, later known as Judge Death, was one of the most deranged youths on that planet. He tortured animals as a boy, and even tricked the family dog Woofy into leaping to its death. His father, a traveling dentist who liked inflicting pain on patients, one day noticed the boy's appetite for cruelty and encouraged it. At one point, Sydney attempted to murder his own sister but failed. This convinces his father they share the same dark nature, so he trains Sydney to assist in dentistry, which basically was a crash course on painful procedures and even killing unwary patients. When Sydney realizes that becoming a judge would let him kill people without legal consequences, he hands his father over to the authorities and earns the privilege of pulling the electric chair switch that executes the old man. Sydney's superiors applaud his ruthlessness. They see him as an especially effective instrument of the law. During his time at law school, Sydney meets a student named Fairfax. Sydney, who's already tutoring other cadets, singles Fairfax out. He orders 3 other judges to beat Fairfax to a pulp to demonstrate that mindless violence has no value unless it serves a vision of what he calls justice. These 3, who become Fear, Fire, and Mortis, eventually revere Sydney's teachings. Fairfax grows wary of Sydney. The other 3 remain loyal, and they become Sydney's core followers. This was the beginning of an alliance that would shake the world and beyond, an alliance that would become the most hurtful bone ever stuck in Judge Dredd's throat. Sydney takes on the name Judge Death when he decides his role is more than just a standard law enforcer. He frames a fellow trainee for his own crimes and sentences minor offenders to death. His rationalization was that executing people for even small transgressions prevents repeat offenses. However, his brand of justice escalates fast. He murders his mother and sister because they have the nerve to be alive, and his twisted mind insists life is the true cause of wrongdoing. I mean, if you're dead, you can't really commit crimes, so you should rather be dead and end the possibility of committing a crime. The 3 like-minded younger judges who stick by him start seeing reason in Judge Death's views on crime and punishment. Oh, and Judge Fuego later adopts the name Judge Fire. Around this time, the sadistic witches known as Phobia and Nausea, who call themselves the Sisters of Death, notice Sydney's brutality, and of course, they find themselves impressed by the man and his ways. They have supernatural abilities and relish mass murder. Sydney, who's never experienced genuine affection, becomes infatuated with both. He discovers they can remove the sin of life by using something called dead fluids, which can transform a living body into a walking corpse. This ritual grants undead powers. The sisters use it on Sydney and his 3 acolytes. Judge Death becomes the first among equals, but he's clearly in charge. Phobia and Nausea turn themselves into ethereal ghost-like beings with hideous magic at their disposal. The downfall of Deadworld. Now that Judges Death, Fear, Fire, and Mortis were undead, the four become unstoppable. They slip through walls, decay, or burn victims in an instant, or induce a terror so terrible that it kills by revealing what lurks beneath their masks. The rest of Deadworld's population cannot stand in their way. Life means nothing to these four, so they dismantle entire cities. Some smaller factions on Deadworld try resisting, but those attempts fail. Judge Fuego, aka Judge Fire, burns down a school with children inside for making too much noise. Judge Mortis rots entire battalions. Judge Fear sows panic among thousands and leads them to their deaths. Sydney leads them with absolute authority, deciding that every living being deserves death. Judge Fairfax, who once trained under Sydney, severs all ties when he sees how far Sydney has gone. Fairfax tries to hide or fight back from the fringes, but the entire planet soon becomes a graveyard. The new Dark Judges wipe out every last community. No official record mentions any large pockets of survivors. Only a few folks hide in remote areas. One of them is Sister Despair, who breaks from the Dark Judges and sets up shop at the bottom of the ocean to conduct strange experiments, though that story unfolds later. For the most part, the four main judges turn Deadworld into an uninhabited wasteland. They claim victory, but they soon discover that total genocide leaves them with nothing to do. They grow bored and insecure after achieving their grim mission. Judge Fear locks himself in a fortress, worried that one of his allies may betray him. Judge Fire, who once had an infatuation with a woman who happens to be Sister Despair, starts brooding about her disappearance. Judge Mortis feels emptiness gnawing at his mind. Judge Death is restless and wants to find fresh victims elsewhere. Everyone else in their dimension is gone. The Sisters of Death occasionally emerge to provide new twisted ideas or encourage them to refine their undead talents. Chance discovery by interdimensional travelers. At the dawn of the 22nd century, dimension-traveling explorers from another universe stumble onto Deadworld. They cannot believe the carnage they see. Perhaps they came looking for resources or knowledge. Instead, they meet the Dark Judges, who promptly kill them. Judge Death takes the explorer's warp device, which grants the power to hop across dimensions. He decides to move on from Deadworld. The others prefer to remain, since they feel they have done enough. Death, fixated on the notion that life everywhere must be illegal, insists on spreading death to new realities. He uses the warp device to reach another planet known as Earth, specifically a city-state called Mega City 1. This future metropolis on an alternate Earth sits in the remains of the eastern United States and has its own brand of judges. Among them, Judge Dredd and psychic Judge Cassandra Anderson. Mega City 1 had always been home to all forms of violent crime, mass overcrowding, and harsh laws, but it's still a living city full of people. Death sees it as a paradise of potential victims. Death's first campaign in Mega City 1. Judge Death arrives in Mega City 1 alone. He explains his philosophy to anyone who dares to ask. Yep, the same old morbid rant about how life is the ultimate crime. People who cross his path die, since standard weapons can't hurt him for long. Bullets pass through him. He can phase in and out of walls, step around corners unseen, or reduce a body to a husk with the flick of a hand. The city's Justice Department has never faced anything quite like him. Judge Dredd, the toughest lawman of Mega City 1, tries to stop him. Dredd's unstoppable sense of duty and advanced weaponry make him a serious foe, though Judge Death's undead nature poses a new challenge. How do you kill that which is not alive? Eventually, Death's body is destroyed, but his spirit remains. Anderson, who has impressive psi powers, decides to trap Death's essence in her own mind. She encases herself in Boing, a miracle plastic that can seal her entire body like a statue. The authorities place this living statue in the Hall of Heroes for safekeeping. They assume that as long as Anderson's body remains encased, Judge Death stays imprisoned inside her consciousness. Rescue by Fear, Fire, and Mortis. Back on Deadworld, Judge Fear, Judge Fire, and Judge Mortis sense Death's peril. They take the same warp device, cross over to Mega City 1, and break him out. They create a new physical form for him through necromantic means. With Death returned to full strength, all four Dark Judges unite. This spells disaster for Mega City 1. Fear uses his horrifying face to kill on sight. Fire incinerates entire sectors. Mortis decays buildings and bodies alike. Death pronounces life a crime. Thousands die. Judge Dredd and Anderson realize they have to force the four monsters back to Deadworld. They manage to seize the warp device from the Dark Judges, which they call a dimension jump globe. They lure the Dark Judges back to Deadworld. Anderson unleashes the psychic power of the planet's countless dead, channeling the spirits of the Dark Judges' victims. That wave of vengeance seemingly snuffs out Death and his allies. People assume that might be the final end. A return from weakness and limbo. The Dark Judges are not gone for good. Their spirits were merely weakened. 4 years pass. Anderson, tricked into returning to Deadworld, accidentally revives them. She is left for dead, but she manages to survive. Fueled by anger, she uses a teleporter against the Dark Judges with the intent of taking care of the Dark Judge problem once and for all. She exiles them to Limbo, a void between dimensions, to keep them from returning. Impressively enough, this solution works for a few years, and Mega City 1 breathes easy. The city's leadership feels the danger is contained, though certain individuals keep the memory alive. Meanwhile, Judge Dredd felt haunted by doubts about the entire judge system, and resigned from his post with the decision that he would now take what they call the Long Walk into the Cursed Earth. This desert wasteland surrounds Mega City 1. In his absence, an ex-judge named Kraken is selected by Chief Judge Silver to serve as a replacement to Judge Dredd. Kraken is actually a clone of Judge Fargo, the genetic source for both Dredd and the entire Judge program. So he's effectively Dredd's brother. He served among a rogue army called the Judah before being captured and reprogrammed. Dredd tests Kraken at one point, senses arrogance, and fails him as a rookie, but the Chief Judge overrides that and Kraken remains at large in the city. Necropolis and the rise of Kraken. The Sisters of Death, Phobia, and Nausea sense that Kraken is vulnerable to manipulation. They whisper into his mind and use him to free the 4 Dark Judges from limbo. This unleashes the worst crisis Mega City 1 has ever seen. The Dark Judges, with the city's judge force under their command, turn the metropolis into Necropolis, the city of the dead. The death toll reaches 60 million. Bodies clog the streets. Citizens die in lines, some from madness, some from summary executions. The 4 Dark Judges and their allied witches watch with glee. Dredd reappears with Anderson and a few cadets, sneaking in through the Undercity. They sever the Sisters' link to Earth, and the Dark Judges lose their power advantage. Fear, Fire, and Mortis land in a secure containment block known as the Tomb. Kraken, corrupted into a 5th Dark Judge, begs for death. He offers no resistance when Dredd executes him with a single bullet. Death escapes again and hides in the Cursed Earth, then fleeing to another dimension. People assume he might not return anytime soon, but they underestimate him. Death escapes and crossovers. Death eventually returns to cause chaos. He lurks in the Sylvia Path block under the alias J. D'Ath, renting an apartment from a nearly blind landlady named Mrs. Gunderson. She fails to notice his ghastly nature. He confesses his life story to a journalist named Scooter, then kills him when Scooter sells a truncated version to a tabloid. Death also crosses paths with Batman on DC's Earth. He meets the Scarecrow, who tries to use fear gas on him. Obviously the plan fails, since Death is not exactly alive. Batman and Dredd team up with Anderson to contain him. This traps Death's spirit in Anderson's mind again until they bring him back to Mega City 1 and lock him in a special cell. The Joker later appears in Mega City 1, dimension hops, and frees the other Dark Judges when they're being transferred to a more secure prison. Judge Fear, Judge Fire, and Judge Mortis wreak havoc in a sealed, hedonistic community, murdering hundreds. Batman, Judge Dredd, and Anderson rally to stop them, recapturing them once more. Yet these victories never last, because the Dark Judges either exploit a gap in security or find an ally with bizarre goals. The Half-Life virus in Las Vegas. In 2124, Death breaks out again. He orchestrates child killings to lure Anderson, injures her so she cannot track him physically, and infects her with the Half-Life virus, a supernatural ailment that warps minds and bodies. He roams the Cursed Earth, then hunts for weapons of mass destruction. He destroys Las Vegas in a cataclysmic attack. The ghosts of his countless victims rise and tear him to shreds, but his spirit remains. Meanwhile, the Sisters of Death, joined by 3 new members, strike Mega City 1 in 2127, with poltergeist phenomena and lethal plagues. Psi Division pushes them back. Death, in the time he spends wandering the Cursed Earth, creates a new undead killer called Mordecai, who picks up Death's mission for a while. The 2134 Soviet Assault and PJ Maybe. By 2134, Mega City 1 reels from a Soviet-backed onslaught. A sleeper agent named Judge Haldane infiltrates the Dark Judge containment vault using a forged warrant. He retrieves the captive Fear, Fire, and Mortis, and helps them regain physical bodies. They respond by killing Haldane and his co-conspirator. The city's authorities scramble to handle the crisis, but a serial killer named PJ Maybe, a cunning genius, captures the Dark Judges for his own purposes. He places them in some form of private custody. Judge Death is still absent, but the core group is out of official hands. Later, the Sisters of Death rescue Judge Death from hell. He returns to Mega City 1, heads straight to PJ Maybe's home, and frees his 3 brothers. He tucks them onto a spaceship called the Mayflower. He then leaves a deliberate trail to lure Dredd and Anderson on board, ensuring they end up in a place with no quick escape. The Mayflower has about 4,000 people on it. The Dark Judges butcher the majority. Dredd and Anderson trap Judge Fear, but can only save a fraction of the ship's passengers. They flee with survivors, leaving Death, Fire, and Mortis floating in space. The 3 remain stuck out there, presumably marooned in the void. The Dominion Nightmare. 2 years after that fiasco, a cargo vessel finds the drifting forms of Judge Death, Fire, and Mortis on its route to the Mega City 1 colony of Dominion. The crew, in a moment of monumental bad luck, brings them on board. The Dark Judges seize the ship, arrive at the spaceport, and possess the colony's highest officials. They wipe out entire settlements, leaving behind half-dead zombies to serve as minions. They sabotage the ship they arrived in so they cannot be easily pursued. They terraform the settlement into a fortress that resembles Deadworld, and kill survivors in small batches, saving them like rations while they await a rescue mission from Mega City 1. They assume reinforcements will eventually show up. That means more victims and a chance to escape. Meanwhile, Judge Fear remains locked in the tomb back in Mega City 1, but he amuses himself by inflicting psychic horrors on vulnerable side judges. Eventually, a compromised side judge sets him free as Judge Fear rejoins the 3 undead brothers on Dominion, and they convert the man into a new Dark Judge. Mega City 1 sends a rescue mission, but the 5 Dark Judges meet them with lethal force. The response team loses many operatives, though some manage to hold off the undead long enough to evacuate a small group of survivors. One woman who stayed alive by reading Judge Death's own text about misery and mass murder uses that knowledge to trap him. She lures him to the colony library, where she detonates a planet-killing bomb while encasing him in Boeing. Death floats in deep space once again, forced to stare at the poem about a beauty of life for what could be an eternity. The rest of the Dark Judges either remain stranded or vanish in the cosmic rubble. Personal details and character traits. Judge Death is presumably the first Dark Judge, and is definitely the most recurring of them all. Born as Sidney Death, he executes his family, frames fellow trainees, and devotes his entire being to wiping out life. He cannot be killed in any final sense because his spirit endures even after defeat. Needless to say, he holds a special hatred for Judge Anderson, who has often trapped his mind within her own. That's bound to hurt any man's ego. And this guy is like an undead super cop who wants absolute annihilation. He also has a strange dynamic with Judge Dredd, who's not psychic but who stands firm in the face of Death's horrors. But then again, that's pretty much expected since Judge Dredd is like the single most important protagonist of the story. Death sometimes uses aliases like J. Death to blend in, though his neighbors rarely realize what he is until it's too late. Judge Fear dresses in a massive helmet with bat-like features and is the owner of a horrifying face that rests beneath the helmet. His method of execution involves making victims gaze into the face of fear, which ends their lives on the spot. One of his most important weaknesses is paranoia, or rather ego. One child on Deadworld once laughed at him instead of showing terror, which rattled him. He frequently worries about losing his grip on fear itself, and sometimes holes up in lonely castles to brood. Judge Fire, once called Judge Fuego, engulfs himself in constant flames. He wields a trident that spews fire, which makes him the Dark Judge with the most ranged capability. He sets entire buildings and districts ablaze. He has a personal history with Sister Despair, whom he convinced to join the Dark Judges. She later betrayed him, so he trekked to the ocean depths to confront her. She killed herself to cheat him of the pleasure. He kept her skull afterward, which only means that his obsession with her was of the highest degree. He chooses to remain on Deadworld at times, but he always reappears whenever the group regathers for a new wave of killing. Judge Mortis rots everything he touches. He has a sheep skull for a head, and his entire skeletal frame looks decayed. Even among his horrific peers, Mortis indulges in grotesque experiments on corpses. He occasionally grows listless or bored, but any chance to eliminate more living beings invigorates him. His powers are especially devastating in crowded areas because entire structures can crumble under the effect of his decay. Other supporting Dark Judges and roles. Sister Despair. The monstrous transformations that the Sisters of Death offer create other Dark Judges who do not pose as much a threat as Death, Fire, Fear, and Mortis. One example is Sister Despair, originally a twisted judge on Deadworld, who catches the eye of Judge Fuego. She helps exterminate humanity, then breaks from the group, fleeing with Judge Reaper to set up a hidden lab beneath the ocean. Judge Fire hunts her down, kills Reaper, and confronts her. She mocks him and blows herself to bits, denying him any chance to kill her on his own terms. Her story shows that Dark Judges sometimes betray each other or harbor personal agendas. Judge Reaper, a massive figure who becomes infatuated with Sister Despair. He apparently clings to a shred of genuine emotion, or at least lust, that sets him apart from the typical Dark Judge. He tries to defend her from fire, but fails and dies quickly. Clearly, even advanced undead powers do not always guarantee survival against a stronger Dark Judge. Judge Scourge. Served as a would-be usurper, he tries to dethrone Judge Death and assume leadership for himself. In fact, he underestimates Death, who tears him apart. But anyone who crosses paths with Death knows what's at stake, unless you're Dredd or Anderson. Judge Death then confesses that he murdered another Dark Judge named Omen, meaning Scourge's entire attempt to prove Death a traitor was pointless. Scourge's death reveals that no one is safe from Death's unpredictability. Judge Silence, burned and mutilated by Judge Fire, has no sight or hearing. Death toys with Silence by accusing him of a murder, knowing Silence cannot respond. Death then unleashes a psychic attack on Silence and others who stand around him, wiping them out once they prove untrustworthy. So yeah, the Dark Judge system is one where you gotta watch your six. No one else is gonna do it for you. The moment you lose sight of your back, someone, most probably your superior, will whoop you in the arse, and before you know it, you're deader than dead. Sister Siren, also called Sister Siren, is another odd figure among the dead. She has clairvoyant abilities and used to be an anti-Judge resistance member. After her conversion, she still shows a strange brand of humor and desire, though she remains committed to the murder of the living. She distrusts the sisters' phobia and nausea, fearing they harbor even darker secrets. She tries to chart her own course within the twisted hierarchy, but she never rises as high as the 4 core Dark Judges. A few lesser-known Dark Judges are also there. For instance, Judge Pierce and Judge Gates, who stalk ex-Judge Fairfax and deliver dead fluids to new converts. Gates tries to lure folks to the Dark Judge's cause. Pierce lacks a strong presence, but he kills at will. They meet their end when Fairfax decapitates Pierce. An accidental spark ignites a gas tank, incinerating what is left of his body. Relationships with Batman and the Joker. The Dark Judges occasionally cross paths with DC Comics characters thanks to dimension-hopping mishaps. In Judgment on Gotham, Judge Death arrives in Batman's universe, meets the Scarecrow, and tries to spread his brand of terror. Batman teams up with Dredd and Anderson to subdue him. Later, the Joker, always hungry for chaos, shows up in Mega City 1 and sets Fear, Fire, and Mortis loose. They carve through a hedonist retreat, slaughtering for sport until Batman and Dredd corner them. These crossovers highlight that the Dark Judges can adapt to any environment because their powers transcend normal mortality, and they feel no moral limitations. What drives these bad guys? Phobia and nausea are the primary reason behind much of the Dark Judge's power. They convert Sidney and his friends into undead abominations, then transform themselves into intangible witches. They orchestrate events like Necropolis by linking Deadworld and Mega City 1. They can augment a judge's undead abilities or twist someone like Kraken into a pawn. They often vanish for a while, but they turn up whenever it's time to revive or rescue the Dark Judges. Their main obsession is total annihilation of life, fueled by arcane rituals and sadistic urges. They recruit extra witches at times, forming a coven that intensifies their poltergeist attacks on Mega City 1. They also rescue Judge Death from hell itself, which shows that their reach extends well beyond ordinary planes of existence. The Dark Judges see themselves as righteous. They argue that if the act of living leads to all crime, eliminating life must be the only solution. Their logic is twisted, but they view it with total conviction. Judge Death believes he is purifying reality, not engaging in wrongdoing. He scoffs at pleas for mercy or any suggestion that he's evil. Judge Fear centers his entire identity on scarring mortals. Judge Fire burns and incinerates to remove offenders. Judge Mortis rots everything in his path, seeking decay as the only honest outcome for living creatures. This arrogance, combined with their undead resilience, makes them far more dangerous than the typical criminals in the Judge Dredd universe. Mega City 1's judges, from Dredd to Anderson, generally act as tough enforcers themselves, but they do value life and try to protect citizens. Attempts at containment. Mega City 1's Justice Department tries many methods to contain the Dark Judges. They encase them in Boeing, a miracle plastic. They bury them in special vaults that hamper their phasing abilities. They trap them in a dimension called Limbo, where they float in a void. Side judges, particularly Anderson, attempt to cage them within their own minds. Occasionally, some advanced or magical cells hold them, as with the glassine crystal that can only be shattered using liquid nitrogen. None of these measures last forever because the Dark Judges are cunning and have powerful allies. The sisters can disrupt psychic boundaries or open dimensional rifts. Saboteurs like the Joker or Soviet agents might intercept prison transfers. Even incompetent bureaucracies can play a role in allowing the Dark Judges to slip free. Wherever they sense an opportunity, they exploit it. Will they ever stay dead? One of the most important questions that keeps resurfacing is, can the Dark Judges be permanently destroyed? They've been shredded by spirits of their victims, locked in limbo, drowned in the vacuum of space, sealed in Boeing, and blasted by bombs. Their physical forms vanish, yet their spirits endure. The Sisters of Death can pull them out of hell itself if needed. Some believe a cosmic-level ritual might banish them forever, but so far, every method has merely delayed the inevitable. Writers in the Judge Dredd series often like keeping them around as recurring nightmares, so they never vanish completely. The many faces of Death and his crew. When Death reveals his face, it's sometimes portrayed as a decaying visage with sunken flesh. Fear's face changes from eyeballs writhing in a cluster to insect-like mandibles, implying that it might be a projection of a victim's worst nightmares. Fire's entire head is ablaze, while Mortis's skull has horns or a sheep's head shape, depending on the depiction. They enjoy these frightful appearances because they know terror can immobilize victims. Each design highlights a specific aspect of their approach. Death with final judgment, Fear with paralyzing dread, Fire with destruction, Mortis with decay. They're not the only ones using that style though. Some lesser judges carry unique headgear or mutated appearances. Judge Scourge, for instance, has whip-like arms. Judge Reaper wields blades in close combat. Sister Despair dresses in a uniform that hints she might have been a med judge. Sister Siren's ghoulish face can reflect her clairvoyant powers. All share that same underlying mania: destroy the living no matter how or why. Some of the Dark Judges, especially after the genocide of Deadworld, experience lingering regrets or neuroses. Judge Fear feels shaken when a child shows him no fear. Judge Fire obsesses over Sister Despair. Mortis tries to craft wine from corpses. Death rents an apartment and muses on how best to destroy people in bulk. They pass the time with these bizarre hobbies because they cannot die and have exhausted the resources of their own planet. They treat existence like an empty stage unless they find new beings to slaughter. Even among themselves, they form weird rivalries. Scourge tries to depose Death. Silence grows silent in the literal sense. Sister Despair and Judge Reaper attempt their own breakaway. These subplots don't last for long. They end with violent resolutions that typically highlight the unstoppable power of the main four or the meddling might of the sisters. Comics, video games, and spin-offs. In video game adaptations like Dredd vs. Death, Judge Fire attacks the Smokatorium. Players must activate sprinklers to push him into giant ventilation fans. The game tries to capture the unstoppable nature of the judges. Many spin-off stories in the comics explore them further, including the fall of Deadworld and Dreams of Deadworld arcs, which add details about the judges' private fears or lonely routines after their victory on Deadworld. An interview with the writer Keck W. mentions that he sees Judge Fear as a tragic figure who faced his downfall the moment Judge Dredd punched him, making him realize not everyone scares easily. Greg Staples, a notable artist, claims he hates drawing Judge Fire because painting moving flames over and over becomes a nightmare. Yet fans adore them for their wicked sense of style. Number 20. An Unfinished Tale. The Dark Judges vanish for stretches of time, only to show up again in cunning ways. They might be drifting in space, lying dormant in a crystal prison, or locked away in a dimension with no exit. Some new crisis or foolhardy villain inevitably unleashes them. People learn too late that dealing with them means courting doom. Even if the city's judges manage to kill a physical body, the spirit of death or fear lingers. Some telepathic link or ritual can spark a new resurrection. Mega City 1 has grown used to dealing with bizarre threats, from insane robots to cosmic menaces. But the Dark Judges remain special. They strike at the heart of what the city stands for because they basically invert the law. Instead of punishing criminals for wrongdoing, they punish everyone for being alive. That extreme approach sets them apart from other adversaries. They do not want power, riches, or territory. They only want to kill, so they never bargain or compromise. The entire concept of reasoned negotiation means nothing to them. Their only logic is that life offends them. Many more conventional villains, like the Joker or rogue Soviet agents, have learned the hard way that the Dark Judges cannot be harnessed as obedient weapons. The entire storyline of the Dark Judges stretches across decades of continuity, featuring arcs that link Deadworld, Mega City 1, the Cursed Earth, Gotham City, and beyond. They've destroyed entire planets, including their own, left huge death tolls in their wake, and forced Dredd, Anderson, and others to push themselves to the brink. They're nightmares that refuse to die. Each Dark Judge exhibits unique powers and personalities. Death personifies their shared evil, though Fear, Fire, and Mortis bring their own horrifying spins. Lesser Dark Judges like Despair, Reaper, and Scourge show how the mania can spread, and how quickly they turn on each other if they sense weakness or betrayal. I still wonder if a permanent end to these fiends is possible. Maybe a final cosmic reckoning would erase them. Perhaps a powerful psychic might sever their link to the physical realm forever. As of now, they linger in the corners of the multiverse, waiting for their next chance to declare life a crime. Each storyline ends with them banished, but not destroyed, guaranteeing their presence looms over the future of Mega City 1. Dredd soldiers on, Anderson remains vigilant, and new judges train in the hope that they can handle the next incursion. The ghosts of Necropolis and Dominion remind everyone that if the Dark Judges return at full strength, the city could fall in days. For now, Judge Death and his undead companions remain among the deadliest threats in the entire Judge Dredd universe. They represent the absolute worst-case scenario of a justice system gone completely insane. Their existence points to a cautionary moral. A society that forgets empathy may soon discover that the ultimate version of zero tolerance is the slaughter of everything that breathes. As long as some power-hungry conspirator or naive explorer believes they can profit from unleashing the Dark Judges, these fiends will keep finding ways back into the realm of the living. Their story may never truly end, and that uneasy truth uplifts their status as some of the most iconic villains in comic history. If you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.